Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This one we're going over my core plays for week 10 of the NFL season on Draftkings. Before we continue though, if you could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. We're getting really close to 3,000 subscribers, so hopefully we can get there soon. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at ChrisPinell16, and I actually need one more follower for 400 followers, so if you want to be the 400th person, yeah, go for it. And if you're interested in the spreadsheets about every single NFL season, projections, stats, color-coded, projected ownership, rankings, cheat sheets, Slack chat. Links in the description below for my Patreon. I think that's enough plugging and stuff, so I say we should probably get right into the video. So we're going to start off with Jamison Winston at 6,800 versus Arizona. He is one of my favorite plays of the week at the quarterback position. And this is my favorite game of the week for fantasy purposes this week. It's a 52-point total with a 28-point team total for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Arizona is terrible versus the pass. They're 28th DVOA versus the pass. They're 32nd versus quarterbacks this season, allowing 27.5 points per game to quarterbacks, which is most in the league. And they're allowing 300 yards passing per game and 2.7 touchdown passes as well. So this is a fantastic matchup for Jameis Winston. I know he can turn the ball over quite a bit and have some really ugly games, but he's also very capable of having some really big fantasy games because he's got great weapons to throw to. And he's averaging nearly 300 yards passing per game and 39 pass attempts. So they do throw the ball quite a bit because they don't really have a strong run game whatsoever. Ronald Jones and those, Peyton Barber or whatever, not really a threat to him. He should be able to have, close to 40 pass attempts again, if not more. And he's got elite options to throw to. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, they're both fantastic players, and they both have great matchups. Well, I should say Mike Evans is going to have to see some Patrick Peterson, but he actually has not been that great this season. Mike Evans is Mike Evans. Dude's a beast. Number one, he has the most fantasy points out of any wide receiver so far this season, so, he's capable of blow-up games. And O.J. Howard, he has a good matchup too. The only problem is they barely use him, but he also has a good matchup. Jameis Winston's got a good matchup. They all do. Makes a ton of sense to like Jameis Winston this week. I think he's going to be close for being highest owned quarterback of the week. So I do like Jameis Winston, cash, and GPP. Now we have a punt option in Ryan Tannehill versus Kansas City. He's only 5,100. And if you want to fit in the studs at running back or some of the elite wide receivers, you got to go cheap at quarterback. Because trust me, I've tried. I cannot fit in guys like Lamar Jackson with McCaffrey, Michael Thomas. It's just not possible. And he's actually played very well with the starting job so far the past 3 weeks. He scored 23, 19, and 28 fantasy points. This game has a 48.5 point total. And if Mahomes ends up playing, which he did practice him full, so it's not like he's going to play, it's only going to be better for Ryan Tannehill for fantasy purposes because more likely that there's a good chance that the Titans fall behind and they're going to have to throw the ball instead of just pounding it with Derrick Henry against that terrible Kansas City rushing defense. So I would hope Mahomes plays, and if he does, even better for Ryan Tannehill here. And the Chiefs actually aren't a dumpster fire versus the pass. They are 4th DVOA, but he did just rip apart the Panthers last week, who were 3rd DVOA versus the pass. And they're also giving up over 20 points per game to quarterbacks, which is 11th most in the league. So Ryan Tannehill at 5,100, he does not need to do much to hit value here. I think he can get you 20 points. I think he can get 250 yards passing, 2 passing touchdowns, maybe get some garbage time if Mahomes ends up playing and they round the score up. I mean, I really don't think they're going to get blown out or anything, but, I just like that he's going to be a dog here. So, Ryan Tannehill, he makes sense at 5,100. He gives me guys like McCaffrey, Michael Thomas, whatever you prefer. So, he makes some sense for me as a cheap play, and he grades out as the number one value play at quarterback this week on my sheet. Kyler Murray at 6,500 versus Tampa Bay. Like I said earlier, it's my favorite game for fantasy purposes this week, so I want as many pieces as I can from this game. Like I said, 52-point team total. The Cardinals have a 24-point team total, so they are slight dogs here, which I do like out of my quarterbacks because I want them to throw the ball quite a bit. And Tampa Bay is a pass funnel defense. I feel like I spelled funnel wrong. I feel like there's one L. I'm not sure. Maybe I did. It doesn't matter. You're not here for grammatical purposes. Tampa Bay is 1st DVOA versus the run, and they're only allowing the 2nd fewest points per game to running backs this season. Tampa Bay is 26th DVOA versus the pass. So as you can see, they're very dramatically worse versus the pass compared to the run. They're giving up 25.8 points per game to quarterbacks, which is 2nd most in the NFL. So we got 2 really bad passing defenses here. So both quarterbacks are in play here. They're allowing 310 passing yards per game and nearly 2.5 touchdowns. Arizona plays at the fastest pace of play in the league, and this should be a pass-heavy approach. As I said, they are very good versus the run, and Kyler Murray also has rushing upside. I believe he's getting about 40 yards rushing per game, and you can also get into the end zone as well. So Kyler Murray, he makes some sense to me at 6,500. The last quarterback I want to talk about is Lamar Jackson at 7,300 versus Cincinnati. I don't love paying top dollar for quarterbacks, but an exception can be made here. His rushing ability is unmatched by anyone else at this position. He's averaging 9 carries and 80 yards per game on the ground, which gives you a built-in 2 passing touchdown floor. Because, I mean, if you just give him his average rushing game, that's 8 points in your start. So you're starting out with 2 passing touchdowns basically with Lamar Jackson. And anything else he does above that, see, he's pretty much, you're playing a running back with passing upside. I'm not saying he's not a good passer, which he's obviously been a much better passer than he is last season. But, I mean, you're basically getting a running back that throws the ball in the quarterback slot, and that, you get insane upside with that. And he's had 3 games with over 100 yards rushing so far this season. Cincinnati's a bottom 10 team when it comes to points getting up the quarterbacks this year too. And last game versus them, I forget, it was a few weeks ago though, earlier in the season, he had 0 passing touchdowns, but 33 fantasy points off of a 100 yards rushing performance with a touchdown. So Lamar Jackson at 7,300, I think he's fine. I think he's going to have some high ownership. He had that big one versus New England. And I think he's a pretty fine play. It's just a matter if you can spend all the way up for him, which I'm not going to make him a total priority, but if I can get him to fit, yeah, I'll take it. But I tend to fill out the quarterback spot, not first, but not last either. That's usually the tight end or defense. But, I want my running backs first, and then I'll play around with wide receivers, then quarterbacks, then we'll build from there. But Lamar Jackson, I think he's a fine play. He's got a very high ceiling in this matchup. Christian McCaffrey, he's the lock of the week at 10,500. You always play Christian McCaffrey. It's not a question of can we fit CMC in, it's how do we fit him in. And the guy just gets a ton of volume. He is the volume king, and that's the most important thing in DFS. You need volume. And he's averaging 27 touches per game, which leads the league, 110 rushing yards per game, which is first, 20 rushing attempts per game, which is first, and 6.5 targets per game, which is fourth. He's also averaging 32.6 points per game on DraftKings, which is 8 points higher than the guy in second, who's Dalvin Cook. I mean, that's pretty substantial difference there. Green Bay is also a very great matchup versus Green Bay. They're giving up 29.6 points per game to running backs, which is 5th most. And Green Bay is also 26th DVOA versus the run. We've seen teams have opposing running backs versus Green Bay have great games. So Christian McCaffrey makes a ton of sense to me. So yeah, fit him in your lineups. Make that the first thing you do this week. He's going to be high owned in cash. If you fade him in cash and he goes off, you are dead. So you got to play him in cash. Figure out the rest of your lineups. I like a nice RB2 option here with Marlin Mack at 7,000 versus Miami. He's a 10.5 point favorite at home, which I always love for my running backs. It leads to a positive game script, and especially for someone that's not heavily involved in the passing game like Marlin Mack. He's not a huge threat in the passing game, so I mean, if they fall behind, it makes me worried, and they're not going to fall behind versus Miami. They should be able to run the ball a ton. And he's averaging 9.88 carries per game, which is second most in the league, only behind Christian McCaffrey. It's going to be in a positive game script, like I said. Miami's 31st DVOA versus the run. They're allowing 30.7 points per game to running backs, which is 4th most in the NFL. And with Hilton being out and the quarterback situation up in the air, I think they're going to lean on Mack in this one. He should have a pretty big game here. I think he can get over 100 rushing yards, maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns. And I'll take that at 7,000. I think he's a pretty safe play this week. And then as a third RB option here, a more cheaper guy. So we had a high-end option, a mid-range option, and a value option. And Dave Montgomery, 5,300 versus Detroit. He makes a ton of sense for me this week. It's just a price and matchup play, and he's also a home favorite running back. Not a huge home favorite, but I think it's like 2.5 points. So it's, it still qualifies. And after Matt Nagy announced he's not an idiot and he knows he needs to run the ball more, he's done just that. So I like the transparency there. He logged 27 carries and 14 carries the past 2 weeks, and he's compiled 9 targets as well total. He's also scored 3 touchdowns, so he's been very good for fantasy purposes. 2 games of over 20 points, and last game was versus Philly, which is one of the toughest matchups in the league for a running back, but he ended up getting a couple goal line touchdowns, which kind of saved his day. And he gets an elite matchup versus Detroit. They're giving up 33.6 points per game to running backs, which is most in the entire league. And he's 18th DVOA versus the run. We saw Josh Jacobs have a really nice game versus them last week. And his price hasn't come up enough yet. I think he's still a really nice value here, and especially for the performances he put up the past 2 weeks, I think he should probably be around 6K, so I do like the value we're getting here. He's going to be very popular, and I expect another big game here. I shouldn't say big game, but I think he's going to have a pretty decent game, and I think he's going to be one of the higher owned guys on the slate. I mean, if you're just getting a bell cow running back at this price tag and a great matchup, you got to take it. And onto the wide receivers, Michael Thomas at 8,300. So it's going to be tough. Can you afford him in CMC? I don't know. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to find a lot of value here, but he's a fantastic play, and he's the clear number 1 wide receiver on the slate. Elite matchup versus Atlanta, and he has elite consistency too. He's yet to have a bad game this season, with his fewest points being 16 versus Seattle. He has a 30% target share, which is tied for second in the league. 69% weighted opportunity share, third in the league. 109 yards per game, first. 9.13 receptions per game, which is first. 11.13 targets per game, which is first. And a lot of that was with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. Now he has Drew Brees, his guy. Nothing not to like here about Michael Thomas besides the price. Atlanta's 31st TBA versus the pass. They're giving up 42.9 points per game to wide receivers, which is fourth most in the NFL. And he could easily be the highest scoring player on the slate. The problem is we got to fit McCaffrey in for cash games, and then I don't know if we can fit McCaffrey and Michael Thomas in. That would be fantastic. That'd be great. You're gonna have to go cheap at quarterback. You're gonna go cheap at tight end. You're gonna have to go cheap at defense. But if you can do it, I'd like it. I think these guys are two best plays on the slate by far. I know it's not bold or anything, but if you can fit them both in, I think that's going to be the way to go. But I understand it's going to be pretty difficult to do, but he's in a smash spot. I think he can get you over 30 fantasy points in this matchup. And I think that, a 32-point team total for the Saints. And, I really don't worry about them being like 13-point favorites because, Michael Thomas is going to be heavily involved. So, Michael Thomas, he makes a lot of sense for me this week. Chris Godwin at 7,300. He's a little bit more affordable and maybe a little bit more viable for cash games because he's, about $1,000 cheaper. And I think the Winston Godwin combo is one of, if not the best stack of the week. I want all the exposure I can in this game, and with Evans dealing with Patrick Peterson, he gets an elite matchup in the slot here. They're giving up 26.2 points per game to slot receivers, which Godwin plays 65% of the time, which is most in the league. Not that Godwin plays the most time in the slot in the league, but the most points per game allowed to slots is the most in the league for Arizona. And they're giving up 40 points per game in general to wide receivers, and they're 28 DVOA versus the pass. I also like Mike Evans. I don't want to make it sound like I don't like Mike Evans, but I just prefer Godwin to him this week. He's a little bit cheaper, and I like the matchup a lot. I shouldn't say a lot better, but I like the matchup better for Godwin. And yeah, like Chris Godwin at 7,300. I expect him to be probably pretty popular. He's a lot more affordable than Michael Thomas. Christian Kirk at 5,200 versus Tampa Bay. So he stood out to me earlier in the week as one of the best plays on the slate, given this price tag, and that stands true for me Thursday night. Still, he leads the team in target share, weighted opportunity share, and market share of the team's air yards. Tampa's 26 DVA versus the pass, and like I said, they're a pass funnel defense. Tampa is giving up 48 points per game to wide receivers, which is most in the entire league. And Christian Kirk is the fourth best wide receiver versus cornerback matchup of the week on PFF. Should be a fast-paced, pass-heavy attack, and I'd expect him to be one of the more popular plays on the slate. He's very affordable. I think he's mispriced here. Good matchup. So Christian Kirk, I like his upside here, and I think he's pretty safe play, 5,200. Jamison Crowder is just a little bit less expensive at 5,000 versus the Giants. He's coming off his second best game of the season versus Miami, where he had 9 targets and 22 fantasy points. His best game of the season was week 1 versus Buffalo, where he had, 16 targets, something like that. It was something insane. But he's got an elite matchup here versus the Giants. They're giving up 43.9 points per game to wide receivers, which is third most in the league. New York is also 27th DVOA versus the pass. The Giants also really struggle in the slot. They're giving up 22.6 points per game, which is bottom 10 in the league versus slot wide receivers. And he also owns PFF's number 1 wide receiver versus cornerback matchup of the week. So Jamison Crowder, I think he's a pretty safe play. You should see near double-digit targets here from Sam Darnold. And yeah, I think this game could be sneaky. I mean, there's some good fantasy options here. I'm not sure if totally if Le'Veon Bell's going to play. I know you have the MRI, but even if he doesn't, I guess that's better for Jamison Crowder because there's more targets to go around. So Jamison Crowder, I think he makes sense. This could be a pretty back and forth game. So I like Jamison Crowder. Then I got 2 cheap tight ends here because I'm not going to tell you guys to play high-end tight ends when I'm telling you that I like all these other high-end guys. So we got to play down somewhere. And I'm planning to do that with either quarterback and or tight end, or I might pay it for quarterback. That's TBT right now, but definitely going to be spending down for tight end and defense this week. So Jack Doyle at 3,800, he stands out a little bit for me versus Miami. He gets the bump with T.Y. Hilton out, and he continues to dominate the snaps at tight end. Last week, he logged 77% of the snaps compared to Ebron's 34%. Now, I don't expect much here, but he's cheap, and the Colts are missing their best receiving option, and it doesn't really matter to me at all. If it's either Brian Hoyer or Brissett under center, it doesn't matter. Brian Hoyer seemed to look his way a little bit, so I think that's fine. Colts have one of the higher implied totals of the slate, and Doyle makes a lot of sense as a cheap option for cash games. He should see a handful of targets versus a bad Miami defense. So Jack Doyle, I think he makes sense at 3,800. I expect him to have some ownership as well. And then the last guy I want to talk about is Mike Gesicki at 3,100 versus Indianapolis. So in the same game, just on the opposite side. He had his breakout game last week versus the Jets. 6 targets, 6 catches, 95 yards, which is good for 15 points. He also played nearly 70% of the snaps last week, and the Dolphins should be in a positive game script for a heavy pass attack as well, being double-digit dogs on the road. And Indy, it's a good matchup. Indy is allowing 15.4 points per game to tight ends, which is 5th most in the league so far. And the loss of Preston Williams, he's on the IR now. He had a pretty good game last week, but he's going to be gone, and this opens up more targets as he was getting 7.5 targets per game, so there's just more targets to go around. The guy's dirt cheap. He allows us to spend up for other positions, and like you said, he's going to let us fit in some other big guys, and it's a good matchup as well. So Mike Gesicki, I don't mind him. I think he's got some upside here, 3,100. I think him and Jack Doyle are going to have some ownership because we want to fit in guys like Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin, Christian McCaffrey, and we can't do that by spending up at every position. So tight end's a logical place to spend down. And as for defenses, I like the Browns defense a lot. I think they're the number one defense of the week for me, just in terms of value, because I want to spend down. They got some talent on the roster. They're playing at home versus Buffalo. At least I think it's at home, pretty sure. Anyway, either way, Josh Allen doesn't scare me too much. The Buffalo defense scares me a little bit, but their offense doesn't scare me too much. Devin Singletary might have a good game, but other than that, I think they're going to be fine at 2,500. And that's going to be it. I mean, I like other guys, but I don't want to list 50 guys here, so these are just my core plays. There's some other GBP plays I like Alvin Kamara, but this is just my core plays video. So pretty much a lot of cash game plays. So anyways, I'm going to leave you with that. If it was helpful, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, @ChrisPennell16. And I'll see you guys in the next video, and I wish you guys the best of luck.